And it's a great pleasure to be joined once again by all of you, and this time as well by Canon Emma Pennington, who is now both visible and audible. Emma is the Canon Missioner at Canterbury Cathedral, the Mother Church of the Anglican Communion, and it's a great joy for us to have her with us today as we discuss the final chapter and everything that we've learned from her book At the Foot of the Cross with Julian of Norwich. Emma advises many people in the practice of spirituality in the Christian life, and she has a doctorate in Julian of Norwich, so it's a subject on which she is well qualified to speak. And I'm going to hand over to her now, first of all, to give us some input and to share with us some of her thoughts on the process of writing this book, and then to lead us in a discussion, picking up on some of the themes around reconciliation and heaven, which you've been discussing in your groups. So over to Emma in Canterbury.
Thank you very much, Richard. Now, the big question is, can you hear me?
Yes, lots of good body language.
That's really wonderful. I'm ever so sorry about the technical problems at the beginning. But run around, try and get other microphones, sort out systems, bash it on the head, and do all that you need to do to actually get it running again. So it's really lovely to be with you. And yeah, I'm really touched that you've taken this book that I wrote as your Lenten book. Yeah, it's very surreal for me to be sitting here actually talking about my own book, but it's really kind that you have done that, and I really hope that it's been useful for you, because one of the things I wanted to do when I was really quite young and at university was I was so taken by the writings of people like Julian and the Cloud Author and Walter Hilton and all those sort of great English devotional writers. I was so struck by them that I just remember saying to my one of my tutors, I just want other people to really love these books and to know about them. And she kind of looked at me and she said, yes. As they do, those wise kind of people who look at undergraduates and all their passion and go, yes, well, you do a bit of study and then maybe you'll have something to say. And I thought, at the time, but no, she was completely right. And of course, there are world experts on Julian. I appreciate that. And in their presence, I do have very little to say on Julian. But what I do love is being able to talk to those people who don't just study her, or find her Middle English interesting, or want to deconstruct the text and find out how it moves, but actually those people who for whom they find Julian has changed their life, or actually they find that through Julian there is the language of God that they've always looked for and have been unable to find in some of the institutional places of the church. So that's where we share a lot, because that's what Julian means to me, really. I wanted to give you just before you went into, if I was going to do this the other way around as we were supposed to do it, I just want to give a kind of a bit of an introduction to this last revelation, because for me, why I wanted to write this book was that I've given lots of talks on Julian, and invariably I would find that I'd say to a room, so how many of you have read the text? The whole text, and lots of people would not put their hands up. So I'd have only about 2 or 3 out of about 20, 30 people who'd actually read the whole thing, and they loved Julian from the kind of excerpts. And I just thought, okay, this is going to be a challenge, but let's just see if we can do something that will actually open up her text a bit, just be a help in some form. Because when you do come to read Julian, she is really dense. She's quite complex to understand, and trying to understand a 14th century text in 2024 isn't always the easiest thing to do, even though what she says spans the kind of generations, because God is the same, you know, yesterday, today, and tomorrow. But how she speaks about God has definitely changed. So that was why I wrote the book, was to really encourage and enable people to read Julian themselves. And I wanted to give you a little bit of just a little bit of an introduction to this ninth revelation, because that's what this final chapter is all about. It's about the ninth revelation, because it really comes a real fulcrum of her revelations. I mean, it's obvious to say, isn't it? But it's right in the middle. So we've had all these visions, these bodily visions, these kind of, you know, sort of things that she's observed outwardly, bodily, manifestation, whatever you want to call them, of the cross. And they've come out of this sort of looking at the crucifix as she's dying. And we've had this whole sequence for pretty much all the way through, up to this point. And then at this point, the tone starts to change. So we start to move away from those kind of, you know, her seeing in a bodily form, but spiritual bodily form, to actually hearing the voice of Jesus. And that's going to become more and more and more and more and more. I'm just on the point of finishing the next book, which follows on from this one. Just about to finish it. Just another 10,000 words to go. And it's really remarkable how different they are. You really can separate the two halves of the book. The one is very much about the bodily suffering of the humanity of Jesus, and the second is like this sort of discussion, this talking between Jesus and Julian. And it's out of that we get all the, you know, the fabulous saying, all shall be well, all shall be well. And those are Jesus's words to Julian. So that's a kind of, you know, the rest of the whole of the end of those visions, very much in that kind of a mood of visions of salvation. But this is the crux moment. This is the fulcrum moment when you turn from the kind of the darkness to the dawn of the visions of salvation. So she doesn't see anything at this point. She just hears a voice that speaks to her, and that opens the beginning of chapter 20. I think it's 22. Yeah, beginning of chapter 22 in the Revelation of Divine Love, the long text. And and then there are 3 words in that she really picks out, and then the rest of the whole revelation, or the 2 chapters, are kind of a meditation on that. And those three words are, how are they? I've written them down: joy, bliss, and delight. Joy, bliss, and delight. And she understands them then in her mind as the 3 heavens. So a good background to this kind of revelation, this vision, is not only the passion piece, the passion section, which talks about when Christ says to the thief, today will be with me in paradise. So that very much underlies this revelation, because she moves from the place on the cross to the place of heaven, and how the 2 are not sort of one's now and one's later, but today you will be with me in heaven. So it's the sense that just being with me on the cross, you are in heaven, that he's saying to the thief. So that brings the cross and salvation right into one. And then the other thing that's behind this is Paul. I pulled it up because I'm not very good. I'm not very good at remembering scripture, so I always have to have some prompt by me. So here we are. And Paul says in 2 Corinthians 12, I know a man in Christ 14 years ago, whether he was in the body, I cannot tell, and whether he was out of the body, I cannot tell, God knows, who was taken up into the third heaven. I know the same man, blah, 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 how he was taken up into paradise and heard words not to be spoken, which no man can utter. So again, those kind of, that image and those words are very much behind this 9th revelation. And this passage was always understood in mystical terms. This was Paul's mystical event, ta-da, and that was absolutely taken down the whole of the Christian tradition. So it would have been completely known to Julian about how significant that was. And for a person who was not reading the Bible, but hearing it more than reading it, she would have known what this 3 heavens means. That it was very clear that 3 heavens is very significant kind of understanding or terminology in that kind of visionary world. So for her, the 3 heavens is not necessarily, a place. It's the 3 people of the Trinity. And again, it's not necessarily the 3 people of the Trinity. It's actually how they interact with each other. And the rest of the chapters, this 22 and 23, are a wonderful kind of, it's a meditation, but it's also a sort of passing in between and around and looking at and turning over, what does this mean? That she goes into this sort of understanding that what the cross is all about, what the cross is all about is this beautiful dance of the Trinity with us. And it's a kind of like a loving, joyous marriage dance of reuniting. Where is it? Yes, the words of joy, bliss, and endless liking. And what's incredible about this is how it's sort of, she takes up a number of the sort of themes that were around in medieval atonement theories. She sort of takes up those things, but she makes them into just something that is about reconciliation, that is about mutual love, that it's that the distancing that was between us and God has become together again. And it's like we're returned to the Garden of Eden and that beautiful time when God spoke, in ease and intimacy with humanity. And that's what she's kind of expressing in this revelation, that ease of expression and delight. As I say, it's quite a complex revelation, and there are many levels to it. And I think I don't want to say too much more about it, because all I can say is please go and read it for yourself, and particularly as we're now entering into Holy Week, it's a wonderful time to return, to that, and to ponder what really happens, what's the mystery of the cross, what does Jesus actually do on the cross. And there are lots of quite harsh atonement theories out there, penal substitution and ransom, and yes, I know they have their basis in scripture and everything, but sometimes they're turned into quite harsh, sort of, oh, God is angry and you've got to pay the price, or he's sent his son down so that I'm going to beat up the son so that you can be free. And you kind of go, what? You sure that's what it's all about? You know, and I think Julian kind of cuts to the chase and said, no, it's not about that, everyone. You know, please just go back. This is about God's love, him showing us love, but also, you know, that the bonds that held us apart from knowing, the servant who couldn't see the Lord anymore, that's gone. You know, I've just made it that we can be together in love, you know. And I think that's a wonderful thought to take into. And if Good Friday and the veneration of the cross ever makes you weep, then maybe this year, you know, weep not tears of sorrow, but weep tears of joy. Because I think that's the reaction that Julian is saying, is, you know, what Christ has done, what God has done through Christ is made everything all right. Not to parry a phrase that we all know, but and so yeah, that's all I really want to say about this revelation. And I kind of feel, you know, that I'd really love to hear what you think, you know, and if you have any questions for me, then please do ask them. I'd love to hear from you. So I don't know if I do this or Howard does this or what we do.
May I suggest, folks, that we do as we've done in the past? You can pop things in the chat if you like, but also maybe the best way is to raise your Zoom hand, which you will get in the reactions section, and that puts you at the front of the queue and allows Emma to see your name there and invite you in and unmute as you do so. So raise your Zoom hands if you've got any thoughts or questions for me.
Where's the reactions section?
Reactions is right at the bottom. If you take your cursor beneath the image, and reactions is next. It's towards the right on mine.
Okay.
So Rachel has raised her hand. Do unmute.
I think it's to do with restoration as well, restoring our relationship with God, as was prior to the fall. So that's being restored because something was broken there, and through the brokenness of Christ on the cross and the suffering he endured, that restoration is made so that we can go back and have the relationship we had with God prior to the fall, that intimacy, that oneness with God that was there originally. And as I say, something was broken at that point, and Jesus had to be broken in order for it to be restored and redeemed. So that was a thought. So we can go back and receive the same relationship we had with God in the garden before the fall.
Yes, thank you, Rachel. Absolutely, yeah, I agree. It's really good. So Liz, did you have a question?
Yeah, I do really, and I just want to say thank you first of all, Emma, because just love the book, and I'm writing the book too. Taken about 12 years to write it, so I'm taking ages, but called Mother God. My mission is to help the world to understand that our God is Mother as well, not just Mary of God, but Holy Spirit, Mother God. And I just loved the way you exposed Julian to us and helped us to understand a little bit, because she's a bit poetic, she's a bit meaningful to different people and revelations to different people. And that's what we found in our group just now. We really had a bit of a debate, and we had a discussion, and I just felt we weren't particularly agreeing, you know, which was fine. It's
Mm.
okay not to agree. We stood up for what we felt about it. And there was one side that said that you know, there was all this suffering, and that heaven perhaps was a place of suffering after all, and that we wouldn't see our family and our dogs, God forbid, we must. And I didn't agree with that. I said, I'm Roman Catholic actually, and I am a priest. I'm a Catholic priest, independent Catholic, ordained or independent Catholic priest. And I feel perhaps sometimes I'm a bit too traditional, a bit stuck in the past, and grievous of things that they did back in Julian's times, with pray to the saints and all that sort of thing. And I felt quite strongly that my dog will be there to greet me and waiting at the Rainbow Road Bridge. Thank you very much. And you know, that was actually that's quite important for me to see my family and to find peace at last. We've had such dreadful suffering on this earth. I have 47 years of, you know, struggling to do God's will, and you know, not being able to be a priest until 2 years ago. I got ordained in the independent Catholic Church. Still a struggle within the Catholic Church. It's been the most horrendous time, and I believe we're going to have peace in heaven. Thank you, please, you know, because seeing Jesus and being still in God's presence is such joy, such a numerous experience. It's got to be peace, heaven, no suffering, I hope. I mean, what do you say?
Absolutely. Well, I wasn't it Thomas Aquinas who was asked about whether
Yeah.
whether animals go to heaven, and I think he said yes, didn't he?
Well, I think it was one of the few things that we do agree with Thomas. And I agree with God being the first cause. That's terribly important, that God's will is in everything. I agree with that. But his attitude towards women was just, I just can't. It's complete nonsense, basically, a lot of what he said. And just war and all that, complete nonsense. But one or two things he said were amazing. Yeah, great. It's typical, isn't it, with humans?
Absolutely, absolutely. And yeah, I think you're right. And of course, Julian comes from the Catholic tradition, that there would have been no Reformed church, you know, in her day. So you're in good company. Yeah, and I think exactly that's what Julian hoped, believed, that, you know, that there will be peace. And actually, when you look at the world today, we think about peace here on the earth, but you think for some people there won't be that peace here on earth. It will only be when they are at peace. And yeah, it's not for me to know what the secret is that Christ, or that Christ will reveal, as Julian says, but my hope is that there will be a reconciliation with God, but also that sense of reconciliation with each other, you know, so that some of the broken relationships that we have here on earth will also be reconciled. And so that idea of wanting to see your loved ones in heaven, and where all the hurts are healed, I think God surely would he not want that for us, you know, that human love is redeemed as well as divine love, you know. So yeah, I agree with you, Liz. And well, welcome to the wonderful world of being clergy. Yeah, thank you very much for your comments. Can I see Jeff and Hope Price? Hello, Jeff, you've got your hand up, or the two of you. Hello, do you want to unmute, Jeff?
Me?
We can hear you.
Thank
yes.
you. Thank you. Thank you so much, Emma. Very stimulating. This whole aspect of the cross and heaven, I wonder if you could expand a bit on that, because you talked about, you know, the thief on the cross turning to Jesus and saying, you know, remember me. And Jesus said, you know, this day you shall be in paradise with me. Was it an act of faith and suffering? How does the cross and faith come together into heaven. Could you expand a bit on that? Because it seems a new revelation to me, that the cross and heaven coming together.
Yeah, thanks for that, Jeff. This is this is a really, I find this a really interesting and I think the way I would want to put it is being a person who's lived with chronic illness and chronic pain for a very long time. I used to find it very difficult when people would say to me, oh, well, when you're in pain, then think about Jesus on the cross. And it's kind of like, I can't think about anything when I'm in pain. I can't pray. I suffer. That is the one state, you suffer. And there are no spiritual thoughts. And it used to make me feel a bit cross, really, because I thought, well, have you actually been to that place? You know, or are you speaking out of real experience? You may be, you know, I wouldn't say anything, but then it made me start to really read Julian and think about, you know, what did she say about suffering, and what does she say about heaven? And that little sentence when she says, when Christ is my heaven. And she's not looking at a heaven, a happy ever after. She's looking at Christ and the cross, and that sense of, you know, when she looks at the cross, when she looks at Christ and the cross and says, that is my heaven. What does she actually mean? Because the other thing that often really annoyed me was this notion of all shall be well. I find that statement really, really distressing, actually. I know many people find it wonderful, but this idea that actually, oh, all be well, you know, we'll get to the end, it'll all be fabulous. And it's like, what do you mean? You know, so we've got to go through all this suffering and then, but it's be all right in the end. It's a bit like, you know, when you're a child and your parents say to you, come, buck up, you know, buck up, it's going to be all right, buck up. And you kind of think, no, I don't. Anyway, so it made me really think, well, what does she really mean by all shall be well? Is she really talking about this heavenly little state that we'll get to, or is she looking at it in different dimensions? And if you get later on into the text, she starts talking to Jesus. She wrestles with Jesus about all shall be well. You know, that goes over chapters and chapters and chapters, and it keeps coming up about 25 times, I think, that little statement. She's not content with it. And she only begins to understand it when she realizes that our reality of things, the way we see things, you know, like our suffering and Christ on the cross is our reality. But there's another reality. And this is the reality of God. And it's in this reality, you know, where Christ is, where divine love is, when reconciliation is. It's all there already. We just don't see it because we're in here struggling away. And she says, so if you look at the cross, you know, the heaven is already there. You know, if you look through the person of Christ, you see the whole Trinity. So this Revelation 19 harks right back to the first revelation. When she sees the cross, she sees Christ on the cross, and she feels great pain. And then suddenly she gets this sense of joy, and she realizes that because she's looking at Christ's humanity through to the divinity where there is the Trinity. So it's not a future of, it's absolutely present within the suffering and the cross. Now, for someone like me who suffers, I get it. I absolutely get it, because it recognizes the suffering, but also says it's not the end of the story. You know, does that make any sense?
Yes, it does. Thank you. Thank you.
It's really tricky to kind of, it's tricky to explain, Julian. And as my DPhil tutor said to me many times, was, yes, Emma, that's very good, but Julian does say it better, doesn't she? Like, yes, she does.
Yeah.
So, which I think is great.
Yeah.
Okay, lovely, thank you.
Very helpful. Thank you so much.
Rachel, hello, Rachel. Do you want to?
Yeah, hi, thank you so much. I think what you've just said, I have just found so brilliant and utterly refreshing, because we are seeing more and more suffering in the world now, aren't we? And it's so important to be honest about suffering and to hear about people's suffering and to hear it in the way that they want to express it, and not trying just to make it better, put a sticky plaster over it. But I think you obviously speak from a place of personal experience, and actually, you know, looking at that very final conclusion in the book is incredibly powerful. But I just want to thank you for that, because I think sometimes as Christians we don't allow ourselves, or others don't allow us, just to be human. And I think where you've written in there is, you know, at that point of suffering, actually, you know, we can sometimes think, you know, oh, it's going to be joyous and amazing because we're in connection with God and everything, but actually we're human, aren't we? And at the time it's awful. And I think it's so important for that honesty, because I think it makes then Jesus and God attainable to everybody when we're honest enough to say, do you know what, it isn't all a bed of roses. I just want to thank you so much, because I think what you've just said and what you've read, what you've written in your book as well, is something, it's about being real and realism with people, isn't it? Because then I think we're in a much better place then to be able to reach people with the gospel. So I just thank you for that.
Well, that's very kind, Rachel. I mean, I have to say that, you know, that I love it when people say, you know, they pray for me, because I know there are many, many times when I can't pray at all. And the idea that that's okay, because there are other people who pray, and it's all right, you know, at that time. So I don't have to, because we belong to the community. And I think that's what's so precious about the community. Yes, of course, we can go it alone in our prayer life as well, but the strength of that community. So yeah, thank you for your words. Lorna. Hi, Lorna.
Hi.
Hi.
Well, first of all, I want to thank you for the book. It really genuinely made me want to go back, and I kept going back to the Revelations and stop reading your book and go back to the Revelation. So it's really great, and I'm really looking forward to the next one now. But what I found really joyful in this chapter 11 was the idea that we are the gift given to him, to Christ, and that it's this joyful garland, and it's us. And I don't know how you managed to get that across, because she made it clear, but you managed to make me understand it. So thank you very much. It was a lovely idea. Really nice. Thank you.
Oh, Lorna, that's very kind of you. Thank you very much. Yeah, it's just beautiful, isn't it? No one can say it better than Julian. Absolutely. Yeah, that we're the crown. Yeah, wonderful stuff. Thank you. Liz.
Hello, Emma. I
Hi,
don't have a question at all. I just wanted to thank everybody and the friends of Julian for the opportunity to join the book group this Lent. I normally do a Lenten retreat, but I decided to do something a wee bit different this year, and this came up. So I'm really glad I participated. And what I find is, and I have to say, it's been a long time since I really sat down and took my time to read a book at this time. And what I found I feel I'm prepared going into Holy Week. I feel your book was at times, using Julian's words, very, very graphic and very challenging. And sometimes I found that I didn't have the words. And what I found myself doing was basically using my needle and threads. And over the weeks, this became my, if you like, my Lenten cloth. And if you don't mind, it's not finished. It's not finished. But, and I won't tell you the whole lot, but I don't know if you can see that, but basically with each chapter, And when I found I couldn't think or put things, express myself in words or write things down, this was what over the weeks I've come to stitch. And it's a reflection on each of Julian's 5 revelations, using your chapters in your book as we go. And as I say, it's not finished yet, but it is amazing to me that it flagged up the creativity of mystery, and through the spirit and the here and now. So thank you for that, and thanks to everybody for their sharing in the breakout groups over the last couple of weeks. So thank you.
That's amazing. Wow, thanks Liz for sharing that with us. That's just incredible. What a beautiful thing. And what
Thank
a
you.
beautiful way. And it's really interesting because I was just a talk actually. There was a conference in Oxford, I think it was last summer, or it may have been the year before. I get, you know, but it was talking all about how Julian's words are like knitting, stitching, and how she knots these words together, knots of sentences. And they were talking about how graphic it was, you know, the knotting of words and the stitching together of language to express a mystery. And in a sense, what they were saying in their sort of, you know, academic way about Julian's language is you've just beautifully shown that is exactly what Julian's words are trying to creatively enable, that sort of stitching together of our life with God and that self-expression. So thank you for sharing that. Wonderful. Are there any other questions that people have? No? No? Okay. So I know we end with some silence, I believe. So what I wanted to do is I wanted to end with Julian, of course. I was going to read this to you in translation, but I think I might read it to you from the Middle English. Let me just try and find the chapter we've been on. So this is my faithful little text of Julian of Norwich. It's very battered. This is the one that I first had when I was back in university. It was the first book of hers. Okay, so I'll just read a bit of what you've been doing, which is the ninth revelation. Then said our good Lord Jesu Christe, asking, Art thou well apaid that I suffered for thee? He said, Yea, good Lord, gramercy. Yea, good Lord, blessed mote thou be. Then said Jesus, our kinder Lord, if thou art paider, I am paider. It is a joy, a bliss, an endless licking to me that ever suffered I passion for thee. And if I might suffer more, I would suffer more. In this failing, my understanding was lifted up into heaven, and there I saw 3 heavens, of which sector I was greatly marvelled. And though I see 3 heavens, and all in the blessed manhood of Christ, none is more, none is less, none is higher, none is lower, but every liken in bliss. For the first heaven Jesus showeth me his Father, in no bodily likeness, but in his property and in his working. That is to say, I saw in Christ that the Father is. So let us now pause and enter into a time of stillness and quiet, giving thanks for our time together, giving thanks for the love that Christ has for us, giving thanks that he delights in walking the road of suffering for us, to reveal once more the joy of the Trinity, the three heavens. So we lay down before you, Christ, all that burdens us, all that prevents us from seeing your love. Open our hearts and our minds, that we may know you in your working and in your being, and so delight with you in your cross and your resurrection. So I'd like to end with the prayer that Julian says. God of thy goodness, give me thyself, for thou art enough to me, and I may nothing ask that is less, that may be full worship to thee. And if I ask anything that is lesser, ever me wanteth, but only in thee I have all. Amen.